when someone pays you, you literally have the money. Whereas when someone pays you with Visa, 60 days later, they can, call up their bank. The bank can claw back money from you. And even though you think you're swiping your credit card and getting, 1% back in rewards, you're probably ending up paying 3 or 4 to maybe even 5 to 10% more. A gas station or is making less than 1% on their gas. And if they could suddenly be making, saving 3% when you swipe your credit card, like that is a 4x in revenue for them. That is a 4x onto their bottom line. Our company really just bridges the gap for people holding Bitcoin and who want to make traditional payments at a brick and retail or online store. We make that really easy, and we give you Bitcoin. Bitcoin can't pay for itself. It incentivizes miners and it incentivizes hash rate and the security of the system, but it doesn't really incentivize developers and progress on top of the protocol. One thing that a lot of people don't know is Bitcoin is open source software. It is just code that is maintained by hundreds of people around the world who are actively contributing, and oftentimes they're not being paid.
Ben Price is the co-founder and CEO of The Bitcoin Company, an app that lets you spend or earn Bitcoin anywhere you shop. In our conversation, Ben explained how the Bitcoin Company's app works. We discussed the challenge of disrupting credit card and loyalty point networks all over the world. We explored the importance of the Lightning Network, and then we talked about the work that Ben is doing on OpenSats. Ben has also asked to have his share of today's show splits sent to OpenSats. So if you enjoy this episode, if you learn something new, the best way to show your support is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network. You can use any Podcasting 2.0 app. There are dozens of them, but my favorite is Fountain. Before we get into today's show, just a quick message from our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Stackwork. And Stackwork is a Lightning-powered transcription tool that takes the best of AIs and humans to create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. We'll have more from Voltage and Stackwork later in the show. Ben, welcome to the show, and I cannot wait to talk about all the things you're building with the Bitcoin Company, OpenSats, talk about Lightning. We've got a lot to cover today, but before we do any of that, let's start, for those who aren't familiar with you, let's get a little background. How did you first discover Bitcoin, and why did you decide to build the Bitcoin Company?
Thanks for having me on, man. Background. One of the many Bens working in Bitcoin, so I wouldn't be surprised if people are getting us mixed up now. I came into Bitcoin, I guess kind of late in the scene. I don't know what late or early is these days, but I was primed from the economic side. So I was always kind of a math nerd in school, but particularly focused on studying economics and game theory in college. Turns out it was all the fake kind of economics. So I was at a public school. I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and it's publicly funded. And later on in the game, I realized, they were just teaching us Keynesian over and over. There was really never any Austrian coverage whatsoever. So that's kind of where I started. So I think a lot of people, come into it from a freedom-minded thing or censorship resistance thing. I was always just super interested in game theory. And so when I think it was I was at a startup in Washington, D.C. after school, and one of my designers was talking about, I don't know, shitcoin X. I don't even want to give it a name, a platform. And, I was just kind of went down the rabbit hole, learned a little bit about, cryptocurrencies, but eventually, got pretty lucky with the fact that I stumbled across Stefan Livera and TFTC really early on. So, I think Gigi started, a Maxi thing. I owe them a lot for setting me on the right track and kind of leading me down the game theory of, why it makes sense to be a Bitcoin maxi, why, monetary economics would dictate that there would be one winner. So I got to avoid a lot of the shitcoin phase. So came into it from that side of things. And then basically, something clicked. I was at least aware that something was wrong with the world, and I didn't quite know what. It was pretty disheartening, actually. I didn't know what to work on. I was at kind of a goofy little automated software as a service startup, and wasn't really like helping anyone. And that's kind of always been a goal in life. And so when I discovered this thing that kind of explained what was going wrong with the world, I realized like, all right, well, this is the one thing that I think like I can work on, and even if it's tangential, even if it's just like moving the needle a little bit, it would theoretically help everyone in the world. So at that point, I kind of like dropped everything, went down the rabbit hole really, really hard, and tried to find a job in the Bitcoin space, which I like almost did. I did join Visa Crypto as their like first product manager. Their team is huge now, but at the time when I joined, it was maybe 3 or 4 strong. And so worked with them for about 18 months, got to work with some of like the smartest cryptographers in the world with the research division, built out a lot of like proof of concept kind of payment things. But the real thing is I learned like how ridiculous the current system is, how broken kind of like the credit and debit card system is, like how the hell interchange works, issuing banks, acquiring banks, processors, gateways, like all the rent-seeking middlemen that kind of stand in between a normal payment. And that kind of opened my eyes. And at that point, after 18 months of kind of trying to get Visa to adopt Bitcoin, they kind of headed another direction towards like NFTs and crypto and all the things that I don't find very interesting. At that point, I reached out to Ben Carman and a few other people in the space, and we decided to start a Bitcoin only company, and that's kind of where TVC started. Actually, fun fact, it was a pool in Guadalajara in Mexico when Carman told me he would join. So I guess that was the original origin.
Love it. That is very cool. I want to focus on this, your time spent at Visa first, because I think this helps set the stage for the work you're doing now. When you look back on that time, what are some of the kind of big misconceptions that you see people in the Bitcoin space having about credit cards and how payments work? Because that is a big focus point for a lot of discussion around Bitcoin and seamless value transfer. And there's a lot of theories and ideas that people bring up about how Bitcoin is better than this payment network. But you actually lived that. You actually got to see the inner workings of it. So I'd love to hear how the views that you see on Twitter, people talking about Bitcoin versus credit cards or Bitcoin versus other payment rails, and your actual experience inside that payment processor.
Oh man, yeah, I left Visa so I wouldn't have to talk too much trash about them. I think the biggest misconception is like we're comparing apples and oranges. Like Visa is not necessarily a settlement, like a final settlement network. When you make when you swipe your card at Jimmy John's or whatever, you're simply authorizing a transaction. It's all going over kind of like a closed source network. So it does scale. Like Visa can handle a lot of transaction throughput. But like what a lot of people don't consider is like that's not final settlement. Our company, even though we do accept Bitcoin, we prefer people pay with Bitcoin. We did recently integrate with like a traditional credit card processor for people that want to make fiat payments, and it's a nightmare. We don't get paid out until multiple days after a transaction. The biggest thing that I think people kind of overlook is fraud and chargebacks. Just yesterday, we got hit with like $600 or $700 of fraud on the platform, which like literally can't happen with Bitcoin and Lightning. I guess theoretically you could get double spent, but as long as you're waiting for confirmations, there is no concept of let me take my money back after I've paid you in Bitcoin. When someone pays you, you literally have the money. Whereas when someone pays you with Visa, 60 days later, they can call up their bank. The bank can claw back money from you. And it's not just clawing back the money, but also like you get hit with a bunch of gateway charges. You're like, there's kind of like a credit and reputation system with your payment processor that gets docked. On top of that, just to avoid this on the front end, you're usually paying, thousands of dollars for some sort of fraud prevention tool. And then, the last piece that everyone kind of talks about and knows about is the interchange. That is another misconception, is that like Visa itself is taking like 2 or 3%. It's actually not the case. Visa takes about 10 bips or like 0.1% typically on a transaction. And it's actually the bank on your credit card and the merchant's bank that receive most of the money. That being said, it's irrelevant. The merchant still has to pay 2.5%. They essentially, pass these fees on to the end user. And even though you think you're swiping your credit card and getting, 1% back in rewards, you're probably ending up paying 3 or 4 to maybe even 5 to 10% more, due to all the kind of the additional things that the merchant has to jump through just to accept these card payments. But the largest misconception, I think, is, the difference between a settlement network and kind of like an authorization network, which Visa is. Visa is kind of just a promise that you'll be paid out in a few days as a merchant. Whereas Bitcoin, the second you pay me, I can go pay my vendors, I can pay my employees, or I can, send it to cold storage. The money is mine. And, when you're comparing that, Bitcoin is by far the best final settlement network in the world.
Mm-hmm. That's very helpful to distinguish the two. And then also on the topic of the fees, so the interchange, that the commonly quoted 2.9% plus 30 cents or whatever it is, that's being split up among a number of parties, Visa being one, but bank being another, and merchant bank being another.
Yeah.
And then you touch on the fraud stuff as well. And, having to, if you're a large merchant, maybe hiring a fraud prevention team, or using all this fraud software that you're talking about, having all these additional risks, and then the cash lag of waiting however many days to receive your payment. If you can bundle all that together, what do you think the actual, can you bring it down to a number? How much are people losing on every transaction? What is that friction? Is it more than 3% if you bundle all the things together?
Oh yeah.
What do you think a good estimate is for that number?
I mean, I can kind of just walk you through the tooling and things, but I would estimate at the end of the day, as a merchant that accepts Bitcoin frictionlessly and perfectly, and it's amazing, and then also being a merchant that has implemented, the ability to process a Visa card or MasterCard payment. We tack on, it's pretty straightforward. We're a rewards company. We offer you, 10% back if you buy an Uber card with us with Bitcoin. However, if you pay with a credit card, we drop that number down to something 5.5%. So just right off the top, there you go. There's 4.5% rewards that, we're taking back because, one, I'm paying, an extra 3% interchange. I'm paying for fraud prevention tools. I'm paying for well, really, it's myself right now, going in and analyzing all these transactions. We get hit with fraud and chargebacks. So just opening these things up to, the credit card networks, I would say it's upwards of 6 or 7% that I have to factor in when I accept a Visa card transaction. Not to mention, the delayed settlement, which I won't put a number on that. But at the very least, you can just go into our app and see, the second you switch your payment method from Lightning or on-chain to credit cards, your rewards typically drop around 4.5%. And I don't think that actually probably covers everything. Our fraud prevention tool per month has a fee of $2,500 or something. And so depending on your volumes, you can kind of average that out over a bunch of transactions. But, that's not accounting for the human time. Anytime you actually get hit with a chargeback, it's really bad. And it's really not straightforward. The reason, I wish I could just put a number on it. The way gateways charge you is this interchange plus models. When you get hit, if you're actually processing card transactions, you should see these end of month statements. These, everyone is a rent seeker. It's not just Visa sitting in the middle. It's the issuing bank, the person on your card. It's the issuer processor, the actual card processing network that's working with that bank. And then there's a merchant bank and a merchant processor. Sometimes there's a gateway. Again, there's fraud tooling. Banks, they figure out how to get their money on top of everything. And then, there's chargebacks and there's probably 7 or 8 middlemen here, and they all make their money by kind of convoluting how much you're paying for everything. And so I think that this whole industry has built itself on top of barriers to entry and making things not very transparent. When I get my credit card statement at the end of the month, or how much we've processed, I'm kind of just hoping they're, paying me out for everything I'm due. If I went line item by line item for everything we're charged, that would be all I do. So it's kind of a ridiculous industry, and it just shows, like there's just layers upon layers of friction, and the consumer does end up paying for that. You see these merchants that say 5% off if you pay with cash. These are the ones who are at least forward thinking enough to know, like, I don't want to deal with Amex and MasterCard and Visa. They're the ones like trying to incentivize consumers to perform a behavior, aka like paying cash, paying a physical bearer asset that makes their life easy. And this is the same model. Like because of all that friction, Bitcoin really is set up to kind of like come in and win here. And I think what that means is the merchants will process payments for less, and they can actually pay that back to their end user. We've yet to really see that happen in too many kind of like mainstream. You don't go into Target and pay 3% less when you pay with Bitcoin. But I do think that's probably the end game. That probably is how merchants start pushing users to paying with either cash or Bitcoin, like these bearer assets that really work better for them.
I like it. Do you think this is intentionally this whole like settlement system that merchants deal with today, and all the different 8 parties that you mentioned that are involved in this transaction, is this like intentionally designed in a way that you can't see how much the actual amount is? There's no sticker that says this transaction costs 8%. It's just, it all is abstracted away. The merchant deals with it, and even the merchant, as you're saying, has all these different bills from different vendors and different parties. Like, they don't even see a single number. And I wonder if that's by design. Like, if you don't see the single number, you almost forget that you're paying this big number. Do you think that's the case?
I mean, for sure, it's definitely by design. Like, it wouldn't be that hard for a gateway or an issuing bank to just say, we're going to charge you 2% for every transaction. And, there might be an opportunity there for, even though it still is rent-seeking behavior, like, I would opt towards that for my credit card transactions, because there's just there really is no way to really boil it down and know, like, this is just the line item cost, which is why you see like all these different ways of handling it. Some people just don't accept credit cards. Other people charge you 3 or 4% more. But I think the most common way is like, well, if the merchant is getting all these like kind of convoluted fees passed down to them, well, they can't really charge all these convoluted fees to their end users. So what are they going to do? They're just going to raise prices by more than enough. Like, if they guess that it's somewhere between 4 and 6% that they're paying for a credit card transaction, well, they're going to charge you at least probably 7% more. And so prices go up. The end user just sees the final number on the goods, but like what you don't realize is all this kind of like mental gymnastics that happens, and your $100 widget is now a $110 widget, and that's not because of inflation, although prices are rising because of that. That's just because of like how ridiculous payments are in the traditional kind of space, and then you layer on top of that rising prices and everything, and you just get prices soaring. And it's unfortunate. The end user kind of gets tricked into their 2% airline miles or their 3% cash back. But like, legitimately, I'm sure people are eating at least 10%, probably 10% more in fees when you are dealing with a merchant, especially a non-sophisticated merchant who's just going to say like, and I'm paying $5 more for every $100 I charge, so let's raise prices by 10%.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so now let's then take a look at what you're building at the Bitcoin company, and how maybe you can give listeners just a high-level overview of how the product works and how you're working to get around this inefficiency that you see in payment systems.
Yeah, so at TBC, at the Bitcoin company, we have like a mobile app for Android and iOS. So you can go to like the App Store and just type in the Bitcoin company. And we're actually, like, where we are today is very similar to a few other companies in the space that you've actually had on, like Lolly, Bitrefill, Fold. We really want to drive Bitcoin adoption. However, you can't typically just walk into a Target and pay with Bitcoin. That would be amazing. That's the end goal. That's what we're all working towards. But there's this kind of chicken and egg problem. Like, merchants don't really want to take the leap and accept Bitcoin, because it is like somewhat of a foreign process to them. To be frank, it's far easier than, setting up a credit card payment, acceptance system. But it's big, scary code. What's running a node to someone who's like in a laundromat? There are some great companies like Ibex and others that are, helping people like with this process. But at the end of the day, let's accept that most merchants today aren't accepting Bitcoin. So like, if I'm living on Bitcoin, or if I'm on a Bitcoin standard, or I want to pay in Bitcoin, how do I do that? Maybe you get lucky. You can convince, the mom or pop to accept Bitcoin to down, I think we've all probably like convinced a bartender to, download Blue Wallet or something and pay them that way. But that's hard. There's a lot of friction there as well, although we should all be doing that. But what we do is we kind of like bridge that gap. So we offer both kind of prepaid Visa cards. So you can come into our app, pay with Bitcoin, and walk away with like a virtual Visa card that you can then, tap to pay at a gas station or at Starbucks or at Walmart, and just like live your life. So, you have Bitcoin in your wallet. The merchant wants to accept dollars. There's like, there is no coincidence of once there. Like what, how are you going to pay? So you come to our app, you buy a Visa card, and you pay them that way. Alternatively, if you're trying to earn a little bit extra, we also sell branded merchant gift cards. So if you're buying an Uber card or Airbnb, or you're going into Jimmy John's, we actually offer those like digital gift cards for sale. And we can get into the whole gift card industry, but the way it works is essentially we acquire these gift cards at like a discount. So let's just say, for the sake of this, like I get an Airbnb card for 10% off. I'll give you 9% Bitcoin back just for buying that Airbnb card. And then you go and check out with a gift card. And so our company really just like bridges the gap for, people holding Bitcoin and who want to make traditional payments at, a brick and retail or online store. And we make that really easy, and we give you Bitcoin back. So we have these two subsets of users. Some are like hardcore Bitcoin stackers who, will do anything to save an extra 10%. So they come into our app and they buy, gift cards for their lunch, or they, when they have a big trip plan, they'll come and buy their Delta Airline gift cards, and they'll earn, $50, $60, $70 back in Bitcoin. And then we have new users, like kind of these coupon clippers, maybe like stay-at-home mom or dads who are just trying to stretch their buck a little further. People who might typically use something like Drop or Rakuten, these like kind of coupon sites, or Honey. And instead of giving you points or airline miles or like these kind of like convoluted rewards, we literally just give you Bitcoin back that you can, withdraw to your Lightning wallet, your Bitcoin wallet, or, send to a friend for payment. So it's really a cool way to get off zero without, if you've ever tried to convince someone to buy Bitcoin, it's a little tough. Some people get it right away, but it took me like years to convince my family. And so this is just like a way to say, okay, you know what? Just go to Belk, go to Whole Foods, go to Home Depot, or like buy your Uber card, and we're going to give you $10 back in Bitcoin. And so it gets people off zero who are otherwise very skeptical, who otherwise wouldn't sign up for like, an exchange account. They don't want to give their passport and photo. And we get them off zero. We get them holding Bitcoin. We hopefully get them withdrawing to their wallet, and maybe asking questions. Like when the price of Bitcoin goes up and I had, $20 in rewards yesterday, and all of a sudden it's worth $40. I don't have that experience when I get airline miles. I don't have that experience with my like Discover cash back. It's just like, it just sits there in the account, and you can like trade it in for a t-shirt or something. With Bitcoin though, it really gets people asking questions and gets them playing around. Like we offer Lightning withdrawals, on-chain withdrawals. And then, hopefully when people are actually checking out at these stores, I always tell people like, I actually paid for this with Bitcoin. So it starts conversations and hopefully starts a bit of a flywheel where merchants realize like, a customer does want to pay with Bitcoin. Right now, they have to use some sort of intermediary like us to make it happen. But hopefully in the future, the merchant can kind of like directly accept it. So it's been really interesting. And it's been a really fun experience. We've been able to give back like, hundreds of millions of sats. I think we've processed over, 20 or 30 Bitcoin now in just under a year without a lot of marketing. So it's been quite the experience. And, we've even dipped our toes into, credit card payments and things, and just like comparing and contrasting how perfectly Bitcoin works with like how ridiculous it is to accept a card transaction it's been quite the experience. Working at Visa, like I saw it from afar, but never had to implement it. And now I feel the pain. And honestly, shout out to my tech team, Carman and Thomas and Suhail. They're the ones that are actually doing the hardcore coding and the ones that have to deal with all this more than me. I just like sign the deals and ask them to go work on it. But it's been quite the experience, and it's been fun to give people Bitcoin back, and hopefully we can.
Very cool. So as I understand, then there's maybe, can we group these into like 3 different buckets, I guess, where you have one is the prepaid card you mentioned, where online or in person you could just set up this prepaid Visa and it just works. Then you have the gift cards, where you're getting a discount on a gift card and then you pass on the savings to the consumer. And then the third piece is the cash back piece, or the sats back piece. Is that tied to you have to be using a gift card to get the sats back, or using a prepaid card?
So right now we give you sats back on everything. That's the good news. You don't get the gift card industry is really strange. So like if it's kind of a quote unquote like crappier brand, I don't want to throw any brands under the bus, but if it's like a small restaurant in Montana, they're going to give you a lot of, a high discount for the gift card. But if it's Amazon, or if it's like a Visa card that is almost as good as cash, you can almost buy anything in the world with it. Your discount comes down to something like 0.5% or 1%. And so that's like where the margins are. If you go to Barnes and Noble, we can give you 15% back. If you're trying to buy an Uber card, it's something more like 3 or 4% back. And it kind of varies in between. But the way we think about like the rewards industry in general is there's like, it's really a hack. Like, this industry is built on the fact that like, all the things we were just talking about with card processing cost money. And so when you actually go check out with a gift card at Starbucks or at Walmart, it's far cheaper for them to process than if you actually like swipe a Visa card. So they're willing to give, a discount. There's a few other like dynamics in the gift card industry. There's breakage. There's free advertising. You see a Walmart every time you open your wallet. But at the end of the day, yeah, there's a few pieces of our rewards puzzle. There's what we call open loop. That is the Visa cards. Those work anywhere. So we offer the ability to add it to your wallet. We give you about like 0.2% back. So you do actually get Bitcoin back for buying these Visa cards, which is crazy. It's kind of like free money. And then there's the closed loop cards. Those give you a higher percentage back. Those are like the Airbnb, the Uber, the cards that work at a specific merchant. And then there's actually like 2 other tiers that we're about to break into. So one piece is something we call card linked offers. That's when you would like link your existing credit cards, swipe it at Walmart or Home Depot, and we just automatically will give you 5 or 10% back. We're actually going to be rolling out that feature here in the next few weeks. And then there's another kind of like another way that people in the industry have been giving Bitcoin back, which is affiliate deals. Those are companies like satsback.com. Lolly is a big one, where you like go and shop through like their link, and then they give you Bitcoin back that way. So there's like 3 or 4 different ways to like really like kind of gamify or like leverage how the system is like broken, or like leverage the kind of like rewards system to actually earn Bitcoin back. And our goal was to actually collapse all these down into kind of like one super rewards application. And then the next phase is we want to go build out like the banking tools and the Bitcoin exchange tools that you would come to expect. So like everything is in one place for you, and everything is built around Bitcoin and talks Bitcoin. But yeah, like that, those are the ways we actually like kind of manufacture rewards. And then like the actual rewards piece is like, yeah, you can just withdraw them at any time. So you accumulate rewards on our platform. We let you withdraw with like LN URL to a Lightning address, via Lightning, via on-chain, really however you want. So, we've been, we were lucky enough to have some really smart tech guys that can implement some of the new age stuff that takes some of the other companies a little bit longer. But yeah, that's the last piece of the puzzle, where instead of like forcing our users to cash in their points for a first class upgrade on Delta, we say withdraw your actual money, put it in cold storage, send it to Unchained or whatever, and just sit on it. And that's we think rewards based on Bitcoin is like the only thing people really should be stacking.
Yeah, that's a really good point about why merchants like gift cards and stuff like that, and points. I knew intuitively, I knew the idea that like they want you in their ecosystem, and if you have a gift card with them, you have to spend it with them. But I didn't clue into that second piece you mentioned, where it's just cheaper to process.
Yeah.
Like for them, they don't have to pay then that 3% fee, do they?
Well, it depends. Like it's interesting. A lot of like the credit card processors. This is something I learned was like they actually roll their gift card program. So like they will do the actual like let's say you're Walmart, and they will process whenever someone swipes a Visa or Mastercard or Amex for you. But then like part of their upsell to get Walmart to use them as a processor is like, hey, we'll also run your gift card program. And typically what they do is the gift card program is a loss leader. So they'll say like, we'll process your gift cards for super cheap. Just make sure that you use us for all your Visa and MasterCard and Amex transactions. And so that's actually like how they get Walmart or someone to sign on. But you started to see like the industry really evolve. Like one of the big use cases or case studies is Starbucks and Amazon, who have actually rolled their own gift card programs, and they do their own processing. So Starbucks decided, let's cut out the middlemen, just like all the Bitcoiners did, and said, we're gonna sell Starbucks cards directly, and we're gonna process them in our app, with our own tech stack. And same with Amazon. So the bigger these companies get, I think they're waking up to the fact that they're essentially throwing away 2 or 3% every, probably more than that, every time they swipe a Visa or MasterCard. There are a lot of like, who thought I would be like, I wanted to be a Bitcoiner and now I'm a gift card guy. It freaking sucks. But there's like a bunch of other reasons. There's breakage. If you open your drawer, I'm sure there's like your junk drawer in the kitchen. There's probably 5 or 6 gift cards that like you've never used. So that's actually just like free money. It's kind of like a interest-free loan to these companies. If you buy $100 Starbucks gift card and you never use it, well, Starbucks has that $100. They're not paying interest on it, and it's essentially like they theoretically have to write it off like cost of goods sold later on, but it's money in their pocket today. There's free marketing, and there's a variety of reasons why these companies want to sell gift cards. There's also upsell. So if you have a $20 gift card, usually people walk into the store and they're like, I have to spend at least $20, and usually they'll overspend by $5 or $6. So the economics all boil down to these merchants know every time I sell $1 worth of gift card, I'm generating $1.26 of revenue. And so their discount margin that they can offer on that is about 26%, or insert whatever number here. And so that's kind of where the industry like evolved. And TBC is just doing the hard work of like, we're going out like partnering with these merchants, and then we take the Bitcoin away from everything. We don't tell the merchants anything about Bitcoin, but really we just like put Bitcoin into the pockets of our users. And it is a bit of a hack, but I mean, shoot, we're in the industry. We want to give Bitcoin back to our users, so we'll hack it for you and give you sats back.
Yeah. And I mean, for the Bitcoiners, that's a great deal, right? You get money that you can use anywhere. You don't have to you're not locked into some system or some points that can be arbitrarily locked or inflated or whatever. So when you look at like we talked about airline miles, we talked about credit card points, gift cards. When you combine them all together, how much of that should Bitcoin eat? Because there's a part of me that says like, well, gift cards have some value because it's weird to send someone like if you get a Christmas gift and you get $50 of cash, you're like, oh, this person was lazy. They didn't even put any thought into like giving me like a particular card or something. It's like they just gave cash. They just couldn't think of anything. But when you get a gift card, you go, oh, that's nice. That's thoughtful. They were considerate, and even though it's locking you in on an ecosystem, there is a sentimental value, I think, to the gift cards, and I think for some people there is value there. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like how much of this industry of like points and locked in systems Bitcoin will eat.
I think for a company like us, it's a bit of a hack. Like the reason we're gift card guys is because like it lets my users who want to live off Bitcoin, it gives them a way to do it. Like unless that merchant is running their own node or running BTC Pay server, or they've been fortunate enough to talk to like IBEX or OpenNode, or maybe Strike is out there doing that now. Like there's no way for me to live off my Bitcoin and go buy a vest at Belk. And so like it really does, like a lot of our users are, we're coming from like a privileged, Western society, but like a lot of our users are unbanked. We have a ton of international users. I was speaking to someone in Japan who's lived there for 7 years and he still cannot get a bank card. And so what he does is he uses our app to spin up a virtual Visa card and literally go shop at 7-Eleven in Japan because he lives off Bitcoin. He doesn't want to hold cash that's, getting inflated out, like crazy. And this lets him, walk into a 7-Eleven and do it. It's also more private. We have we don't ask like a ton of KYC or anything for a user to buy a Visa card or a gift card. So a lot of users use us for privacy reasons. But I think like the real reason is it creates a middle ground. So I can't walk into a store today and pay with my Bitcoin. I have to either jump through a hoop and buy a Visa card or a Bitcoin, or a gift card. But I think like this is that kind of like short-term bridge, because I do think the way we are moving is that more and more merchants will start to wake up to the fact that, hey, I actually get to keep 5% in my pocket every time someone makes a Bitcoin payment. And the real problem here is that like the sales cycles for these like credit card payment systems and things, they're extraordinarily long. Once you lock yourself into a specific processor, like you pick Shopify or you pick Stripe or you pick checkout.com, and then you spend like the nightmare that it is to actually integrate it, you're not switching, at least for multiple years. I know at Visa and the companies that I've worked with in the past, like their sales cycles are literally multi-year sales cycles to get one big brand to switch to a new processor. And so that's really tough, but it will happen. There will be a cycle pretty soon where the next time, Walmart is considering switching a processor, they're probably going to consider a processor that also includes Bitcoin as a payment method. But until that day comes, we can drive demand from the consumer side. We can still let people live off their Bitcoin until the merchants kind of catch up and start accepting Bitcoin. So it is this bit of a chicken and egg problem. And it just gets us closer to this like middle ground where I think in, 3, 4, 5 years, you should be able to walk into far more merchants and, be able to check out with Bitcoin. Until then, I think, this gift card industry will flourish a little bit. I'm not sure about the whole, like, will there be a world where giving the gift of Bitcoin is like very common in the future? I disagree with you. I'd rather receive cash than like a merchant gift card. I shouldn't say that because that's like what my business is based off of. But I think it's like I'd rather not be locked in. So I think in a world where you can gift someone Bitcoin, I think that's probably like the most thoughtful gift. But I think it's it's a hack. It's a hack that actually earns you free Bitcoin, which I think is probably the biggest thing here. It helps get new users off zero, and I think that's what's like kind of the most profound thing is when someone like gets their hand on their first Bitcoin and they didn't have to like go to Coinbase or some crappy exchange to do it. That's what drives more consumer adoption moving forward, which in turn drives more merchant adoption, because if every single Karen that walks into your store asks you if you pay with Bitcoin or if you can accept Bitcoin, eventually you might call up, you might look at that cold email from Ibex Mercado or the Bitcoin company and say like, all right, let me look into accepting Bitcoin. We have enough users who are demanding it, and now it's time. And hopefully that's already been naturally progressing, but I do see that probably speeding up in the future.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage empowers engineers to integrate Bitcoin and Lightning Network payments into their business stack with an enterprise-grade experience. The team at Voltage is building the complete tool set so that you can do more than simply spin up nodes, but also understand and interpret your node's data. Their new product, Surge, gives engineers the capability to quickly solve problems and optimize operations. With node insights and visibility through time series data, you get dynamic and complex insights never available before. You can get complete control with insanely fast onboarding, advanced client-side encryption, and zero management infrastructure, making backups, networking, and upgrades simple. Get a free 7-day trial today at voltage.cloud.
I agree. It's really important to get people that first taste of Bitcoin. And if you can do it in a way that's more friendly than here, put all your hard-earned savings into Bitcoin. For a lot of people, that pitch doesn't work, right? Like unless you're an investor or you're like a real enthusiast, you're not at the stage where you're ready to do that. So if you can give someone Bitcoin for shopping or playing games or listening to podcasts or whatever it is, I agree. That's definitely an interesting like bridge.
Yeah.
Now at the other end of this bridge, where you make the transition from a fiat world to a Bitcoin world, I'm curious to know your thoughts on how you tackle the network effects that have formed between credit card companies and airline points and things like that. Like these are systems that have been built up over the last 50 some odd years and have now become staples in society, right? Like everyone just knows you book an airline ticket, you get points. Everyone just knows that. And everyone knows you can tap a Visa card. You don't go into a store ever wondering. I mean, I guess there are some stores that don't, but more or less everywhere accepts it. Or if you have a Visa card, like when I go travel, I can just take a card and I don't have to worry about having like local cash in that currency. So how do you get to the point where that network effect breaks, right? Like, because eventually to get to a Bitcoin standard, like a lot of these systems will not operate the same way, right? How do you get across the other side of that bridge and flip the stack on the existing system?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, in favor of like shilling my company, this is like our best use case. Is like when you're traveling abroad and you're holding Bitcoin and you know that like you need to swipe your card at a grocery store so you can eat that day. Well, then you can like really easily pop open our app. Maybe we have a gift card for them, but like we certainly have a Visa card. And so that's one of our main use cases is like international travelers. You've also started to see like a lot of like neo banks that are quote unquote, Bitcoin friendly. There's a few companies now. I think Cash App is one of them where you can send Bitcoin and, load up your Cash App account and then theoretically like swipe your Visa card. And so that's like kind of the end state is, TBC or the Bitcoin company in general, like what our goal is to build like this middle ground. There's a lot of Bitcoiners that want to kill the banks and kill the payment networks. And that is the end state. Like I really do believe that is the end state of things, but it's going to be kind of a more like gradual transition. And I think that's just, the natural progression of the world. My mom is not going to go from having 3 bank accounts and, 100 credit cards to like, getting on zero, like, Sahil or whatever, and and like only using Bitcoin and demanding that everyone uses Bitcoin. But is there a way that we can build like a bank that actually, or like a financial system or a financial company that actually lets her use Bitcoin and then lets her use fiat when she wants to? There's really not many companies that let you, top up your bank account on a Saturday and with Bitcoin and send an ACH or a wire payment to pay your mortgage. And so like having that kind of like on off ramp bridge, I think is a big like step in the right direction. And a lot of banks don't support that. Your Wells Fargo's of America, your bank, Bank of America, your Chase, like they don't speak Bitcoin. So the best way that you can kind of like bridge that gap is either, a company like Fold or someone who offers a maybe a debit card that you can load up with Bitcoin. But I think in the future, there's going to be more and more banks that do turn on that kind of like Bitcoin native or like Bitcoin functionality where, you can top up your checking account or you can top up your debit card with Bitcoin. And then, if you happen to walk into a merchant that doesn't accept, Lightning, then you can swipe your card. So I think like that's going to be the world we live in for a little bit. But maybe there is some catalyst. Like, again, I will shout out the guys at Ibex Mercado and OpenNode and Strike who are doing like really good work onboarding merchants all over the world. BTC Pay Server is probably the most influential tool in Bitcoin where anyone can, accept Bitcoin. However, one of the big use cases that, most mainstream merchants have is like the volatility of it. They want to accept Bitcoin. But if your margins are 2% on the bag of potato chips that you're accepting this payment for, you can't withstand a 5%, drop. So they typically, maybe they want to accept Bitcoin, but they want to trade it into their local fiat currency just to make sure they lock in their profit margins and they can stay in business tomorrow. And, some of these companies that commingle fiat with Bitcoin are the bridge. And I think we all know, like, the evolution of money, it goes from means of exchange to unit of account. We're not at the unit of account point yet. I mean, a lot of Bitcoiners are there, but most of the world is not there yet. Most of the world can't handle, the volatility in fiat terms of Bitcoin. And that's a little bit Fiat's fault, and it's a little bit, the fact that not every consumer and not every merchant and not every supplier accepts Bitcoin. So it's going to be about like this gradual transition. We've started to see the forward-looking merchants already begin to accept Bitcoin. We've started to see the forward-looking suppliers up in the supply chain above those merchants accept Bitcoin. As more and more of these people and more consumers demand to pay it, this circular economy of like, maybe I don't actually need to trade out of my Bitcoin into dollars. I can pay my supplier. I can, pay my butcher. I can go shopping at, my local grocery store and actually use this currency. As that like flywheel starts, I don't think we'll have to like continually bridge this gap into the fiat system, but I don't know. It's kind of inevitable. It is the chicken and egg problem, I'm not sure which side is going to solve it first. I have a hunch that it's going to be consumers like really pushing on the, I want to pay in Bitcoin side. And then they just like force the merchants into figuring out like, oh crap, I accepted my first Bitcoin payment. That was weird. But also, why don't I have to pay 3% interchange? Wait, I didn't have to sign up for like a bank account and KYC. I can just like put a wallet into all of my on my POS or like in all my employees' hands. And I think like, because the current system is so broken, if enough people like start to actually interact with Bitcoin, it's going to naturally become adopted. You're going to start seeing instead of 5% off when you pay with cash, it'll be 5% off when you pay with cash and 10% off when you pay with Bitcoin. And so I think like, I'm hoping that we start to see that more and more. And, it is going to take companies like us building from the consumer side, actually letting people talk to their bank and, the fiat system. And it's going to take merchants doing the same thing from the other side. So, we're going to team up with, as many IBEXs and strikes of the world to try and come at this from different angles. But at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a consumer side thing. And, the best thing I think we can do is, even if we know the merchant isn't going to accept it, go in there and annoy them and tell them you want to pay with Bitcoin every single time you buy your Apple, and until maybe they download a wallet and start taking it and like kind of figure out what it's all about.
And there's some precedent for that too. Like I think of the food industry, and I look at all the different like diet fads and trends that have come and gone over the last few years. And like every single one of them, you look at all the big like food manufacturers and anyone look at all the big names in the grocery store. Everyone's serving things that are now gluten-free or vegan or Impossible. Like every single diet is catered to. And you got to imagine like these diets are serving a small minority of people. Like sure, there are people who are gluten-free and vegan and all the different things. There's too many to count at this point, but it doesn't take much more than like a few percentage points of people who actually want to adopt a certain lifestyle, whether that's their diet or their money, before I think it really does push almost everyone to get on board, because everyone would be happy to serve this extra 3% or 5% of people if it meant they get extra customers and extra revenue. And I think maybe we're at that stage where we're like, still only maybe 1% or less than 1% of people coming into stores asking for Bitcoin. As soon as there's a tipping point though, at some point we get to 3, 4, 5%. And then all of a sudden everyone goes, okay, you know what? It's worth the hassle. I'd like an extra 5% for my bottom line in my business. So let's do it.
Yeah, that's like the whole halal thing. Like, not that many people really care, but it's just easier to produce things that way. And I think shout out to like Corey Clipston. I think he wrote like a really good piece on like the intransigent, I don't even know how to say this word, intransigent minority, where like their thesis is, I think it only takes, 1 or 2% of like a vocal minority to change the way that everyone is doing something. But we're also not trying to force something bad on people. Like, it is an opt-in
Right.
system. It's cheaper, it's better, it's like faster, stronger than fiat. Like, it works better. The merchants will win if they ultimately adopt it. And so we're starting to see it. It's like, it is slowly happening. There
Yeah.
are, I think I was in Croatia a few months ago, and their like big national grocery store accepts Bitcoin. Now, I don't think many people are paying with it yet, but they do accept it. And so like, clearly, enough people got into their ear, or maybe they have a really smart CFO who realized, like, heck, if we can get 5% of our users stop swiping Visa cards and start to pay with Bitcoin, that's like a huge amount on our bottom line. And like, that's what people don't realize, is like, a lot of these companies, like, people aren't always operating on 150% margins. Like, a gas station or is making less than 1% on their gas. And if they could suddenly be making saving 3% when you swipe your credit card, like, that is a 4x in revenue for them. That is a 4x onto their bottom line. Like, that would genuinely change their business models. And so people are greedy. That's what we can rely on. People aren't stupid. People are greedy, and they move to the best money over time. That's how we got to gold. Unfortunately, we got rugged by Nixon and a few other people, and they rewrote the whole system based on fiat. But that is a very short-lived experiment. Like, if you zoom out, 3,000 years of human history coalesced around gold as the best money. If you zoom out some more, this little blip in history where we did the failed central banking fiat experiment is going to be very small. And moving forward past this, people are going to use Bitcoin. That will happen. It's just about like, how quickly will that happen? How can we speed that up? And I think like, bridging the gap, trying to make it easier for the people who do already want to opt in and pay Bitcoin. That's something we're working on. But in 20, 30, 40 years, this is going to be, we'll look back and laugh at this conversation. Like, everyone will be accepting Bitcoin, and it will be ridiculous to think that like there were these plastic cards that charged us 3% and paid you 2 weeks later, and then 60 days later you can get like rugged and the money's gone. Like, it's such a ridiculous system, and we'll get past it. It's just I'm hoping we can do it sooner rather than later. If I'm on my deathbed and I'm paying a Visa card for my medical bill, something went terribly wrong.
Well, this touches on an interesting discussion point. There's the topic of Bitcoin banks. I believe has been around since the inception of Bitcoin. I think there was an old Hal Finney post about potentially seeing Bitcoin banks in the future. And you've raised the discussion topic about banks already in this conversation. So I have to ask you, what do you think the role of a Bitcoin bank is? What does that look like in the future?
Yeah, so I had a talk about this at like Baltic Honey Badger. It was, banks are evil, or like building a less evil bank. So there's a lot of companies in the space right now that are exclusively Bitcoin only, and power to them. I wish that we had that liberty to like only be working with Bitcoin. It just works. However, our thesis at the Bitcoin company is that like, if we want to onboard the next 90% of the world, 99% of the world onto Bitcoin, we are going to need, some sort of connection to the fiat system. And today, like, what that looks like is you literally wire money from, if you're lucky enough to have a bank account, you typically, and you're lucky enough or smart enough to be a Bitcoiner at this point, you probably have to send a wire payment or an ACH from your traditional bank to your exchange. They treat you like a crazy person. They might shut down your bank account. You pay your wire fees, you buy your Bitcoin, and then if you ever need to live off that Bitcoin, you probably have to go back to your exchange, sell it into dollars or fiat, wire it back to your bank account, and then go pay with dollars or wherever. There's a few ways to get around this now. You can buy gift cards, you can buy Visa cards with Bitcoin, but that's how most people interact with Bitcoin. It's like kind of forces you into treating it as an investment asset rather than potentially treating it as just money, as, whatever you want to live your life off of. And so I think the next progression of, Bitcoin banks or Bitcoin neobanks is just going to be people that offer your traditional banking services, and then they offer Bitcoin right alongside of it, and don't treat you like a crazy person. Don't treat you like you're some crazy speculative investor just for trying to use Bitcoin. And that's kind of the vision that, is the next thing that TBC wants to fulfill. There are other companies doing it. I think Cash App has done a good job. Strike, I think, is on the right path. I think even like some companies like Venmo and PayPal, I think they opened up withdrawals now, so they kind of treat it a little more like an asset alongside, fiat rather than, an investment asset. And so the way I think that like we're going to see banks progress is maybe the Wells Fargos of the world and the Bank of America and the Chase, maybe they turn on Bitcoin. But I got to admit, I worked with these banks when I was at Visa. It takes them 5 years to roll out a credit card program, let alone build out Lightning infrastructure or even on-chain infrastructure. Like you see some of these legacy companies that took years and years and years to even implement Lightning or implement Taproot or some of these really basic things. So what we've already seen is like the evolution of neobanks that came in, and all these like behemoth banks, the Wells Fargos of America, the Chases, they didn't innovate fast enough. So these neobanks came in and they did stupid things like mobile check deposits, which is actually great. Like it's fantastic to not have to go into a bank when you want to deposit a check. Or they offered things like 2-day early payment on your salary. And that, that a little bit that shows like the terrible state of the world we're in, that people will like literally switch banking providers to get paid 2 days early. But it's just these little features that they tweaked on. And, I think the next progression is you have these like old legacy banks. You have the neobanks that do like, 2-day early deposit. And the next phase is going to be the people who actually adopt Bitcoin and put it alongside your fiat. And so what we want to do at TBC is, if you want to top up your bank account on Friday at 6 p.m. or Saturday at 2 p.m., you can't really do that. You can't send a wire payment. You can't do that with fiat, at least. You can't send a wire payment. You can't send an ACH. It's unreal how legacy the United States system is. Some other countries are actually way ahead of us on at least the traditional side of things. But I think, it'll be the people who say, well, send us Bitcoin. We'll convert it to, fiat for you, or we'll hold it in Bitcoin. So you'll have a Bitcoin account and you'll have a fiat account. And then whenever you go to swipe your debit card or you want to, pay an ACH payment for your rent, we'll just deduct from your Bitcoin balance. And, we speak Bitcoin, we speak fiat. And so like work with us instead of having to treat, have an investment account and a traditional bank account. And I think like that's going to be the new wave of Bitcoin banks. It's nothing groundbreaking, to be frank. There's like hundreds of banking as a service providers. Tons of people use Prime Trust. There's Treasury Prime. There's Solidify. There's hundreds of these companies that build banking as a service tools. The real challenge is actually interacting with the fiat system. So companies like us will come along who really see the value in Bitcoin. We'll say, okay, we'll bang our heads against the wall for 1 year and we'll build out the perfect bank. We'll let you send a check. We'll let you do mobile deposit. Heck, if you want to do buy now, pay later, you want your debit card, whatever, we'll do all that. But we'll also build the Bitcoin stuff that we know the current banks just won't do. They either won't do it, they refuse to do it, they can't do it, but we will do it. And so we're going to be a bank that just treats you like a normal person for using Bitcoin. And I think once you have that as an option, well, now it becomes much easier to save in Bitcoin. It becomes much easier to pay people in Bitcoin. And then as a fallback, you have fiat, but it doesn't have to be, your first and, foremost payment method. And I think we've already started to see some companies do that. I think, we've kind of been pigeonholed into this kind of you have to build an exchange, but I don't think that's the case. I think more and more people will come along and actually build a finance app that speaks both fiat and Bitcoin. And pretty soon here, I think, we'll be rolling out this feature set. So we'll test that thesis for you live.
Very
live
cool.
On air.
Nice. So yeah, it's really like a bank that is fluent in completely fluent in Bitcoin and in fiat, and can bridge these two systems together and use them for their advantages. What role does the Lightning Network play for a Bitcoin bank in your view?
I think the Lightning Network is, for sure what is going to kill like the traditional payment networks as we know it. It kind of has this reputation for smaller value payments, but I know for a fact there have been like, multi Bitcoin transactions sent over the Lightning Network, and it just works. It is a real time settlement system, which we do not have today. The closest thing is maybe the Swift wire system, which costs $15 to send a wire, which is actually not what it costs. That's what banks charge you. It costs them about a cent, and they just like upcharge you thousands of percent to get access to it. But yeah, the Lightning Network plays a huge role. It will be, I believe, how everyone is making payments in the future. It is near free. It is instant. It is real time. And it's not hard to integrate. We integrated, we launched our company with Lightning first, and then we backed our way into Fiat, and then we backed our way into, on-chain Bitcoin payments. I think the one barrier with Lightning is just like not that many people know about it at this point. There are still, these like shit coins popping up everywhere that say Bitcoin is too slow. And then, they're talking about the base layer, and I don't even think they understand that like you have to build these things in layers. Bitcoin isn't meant, on-chain Bitcoin isn't meant to scale for like necessarily the, instant real-time payments use case. So I think like as more and more people adopt Bitcoin, the next progression in your Bitcoin journey is learning, what Lightning is. And then you get this real-time experience of being able to pay anyone, anywhere in the world instantly for free. And, I think that'll just be built right in. Like most wallets today, I think, I'm a Bitcoiner. I rarely send an on-chain payment these days. I'm like always using Lightning. And I think like, first step, get people to adopt Bitcoin. Next step, get them to adopt Lightning. And I think like, Venmo took off, PayPal took off, Zelle took off. These are essentially centralized replicas. Again, with some drawbacks, there's barriers to entry as far as identity and KYC and chargebacks and things. But that use case of sending money in real time clearly has like, there is product market fit for that. And people want that. They just don't know that it exists yet. And so I think the biggest thing is like, again, maybe it's building out banks that are, speak Lightning. Maybe it's getting more, more merchants, Bitcoin wallets or Lightning wallets. But I don't think there's going to be that many people in the world sending like on-chain payments in the future. I think it very much will be the Lightning Network. That is probably what most people consider to be Bitcoin.
Interesting. So even up to the scale of like, if you think about what a consumer pays on a regular basis, the biggest bill someone might have to pay every month, maybe a mortgage or rent, and you get up into a couple $1,000, maybe a car payment or a big vacation or something like that. You figure all that over time will be done on Lightning rather than on chain?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just mathematically, on-chain payments won't scale. Like there's not enough block space for everyone to be making their mortgage payments with Bitcoin. Although, today it's still economical. Like I can still make a, $1 billion payment for, some yacht or something, and I pay, 40 cents for it. That being said, if and when let's say when Bitcoin gets adopted by the world, there's going to be 8 billion people fighting for block space. We're not always going to be in a world where you can send a 1 sat per VByte transaction. And in fact, like they're probably, I think on the same, mathematically like analytical argument, there's not enough block space for everyone in the world to have like a Lightning channel. So there will probably be like centralization and centralized providers, like almost like the Uncle Jims that let people access this Lightning Network. And maybe that is a bank, maybe that is your local neighborhood credit union or your Fediment or something. But like Bitcoin, if we want it to be globally accessible and by default like censorship resistant and anyone to have access, it can't match like the throughput that we need to get from it. So I think like as we scale up, you'll start to see more and more service providers kind of like provide tooling for people to access the Lightning Network, and they're not even going to need to know they're using Lightning. Like there's some really amazing apps out today that it looks like you're sending dollars, or it looks like you're sending, euros, and you're sending Bitcoin over the Lightning Network. And I think it can all be abstracted away. And then eventually we'll get to the point where like people will forget what fiat is, and Sats will become the standard, and everyone will have a Bitcoin wallet, or a Lightning wallet, or maybe a bank that speaks Bitcoin. But it's again, it's this gradual transition, and there's a lot of people fighting the Bitcoin only fight. There's a lot of people who are doing the whole fiat thing. There's very few people like merging the two. And then, where we think we can fit in is not giving up our values. So there are a lot of Bitcoin or crypto companies that kind of, I'll say, like, play the game. They might do like, they easily cop out when, they do more KYC than necessary, or they do more on-chain analytics than necessary to comply with, recommendations rather than laws. And I think, as privacy becomes, more and more important in this kind of like surveillance society we're starting to live in, hopefully people will start choosing service providers that, really try and, build out privacy-focused Bitcoin tooling for people and really stick up for their users rather than kind of sell them down the river. So that's a niche we're trying to fill. We'll see if we can do it.
Yeah. What can people do to enhance their privacy while using Bitcoin and Lightning today? Like, are there any actionable tips you can give people listening to this show, steps they can take right now to really kind of like improve their privacy and kind of cover up their financial footprints, I guess?
Yeah, I think like first and foremost, it's just like making small steps in the right direction. So you can go the whole cypherpunk route and try and become your own Satoshi where no one in the world knows who you are. But that shit is hard. It is really, really hard. And it's probably unattainable for most people. So like a simple thing like using a VPN is a good start. A simple thing like choosing a service provider that you think has privacy in its best interest, that isn't like outwardly using on-chain analytics and selling your data. So, stay away from the Coinbases of the world and focus more on like Bitcoin only companies. That's one way to start. Using peers, like peer-to-peer transactions, like going to your local Bitcoin meetup and buying Bitcoin for cash there rather than using an exchange is a great one. There are also some exchanges that are starting to experiment with collaborative transactions. So this is one thing TBC really wants to push on when we launch our ability to buy and sell Bitcoin is, almost like mixing your transactions with other people as you come off the exchange. So we live in a world where, unfortunately, if you're not doing like a peer-to-peer kind of transaction, you typically have to give up some sort of identity, whether it's your driver's license or your name, in order to acquire Bitcoin. If you accept that as a fact, which you don't have to, again, there's tons of ways to do peer-to-peer transactions. But let's say you are going to choose a service provider and they're going to be your bank and your Bitcoin exchange for you. At the very least, what they can do is provide privacy-preserving tools for you. So when you go to withdraw, you should always be using service providers who urge you to withdraw off of their exchange. But when you go and do that, is there a way to break the link between Kevin Rook, who bought Bitcoin with the Bitcoin company, and then when you go to withdraw, I don't want to know your address. Coinbase wants to know your address. Kraken and all these other companies, they want to know your address because they can monetize that. But like, you should be looking for a service provider that ideally tries to completely break the link between you and where your money is going. So Bull Bitcoin does a good job of this up in Canada. I think they're one of the few people that are using kind of like collaborative transactions off the platform. But in practice, what you can do is use a service provider that, if you and I both go buy Bitcoin on this exchange and then we want to go withdraw it, well, then we can both withdraw it at the same time and the same amount, and we kind of break the link. No one, even the exchange using like kind of like a blinded withdrawal system might not know that, Kevin is this address and Ben is this address. And so that's actually something I'm fortunate enough to work with Ben Carman, who's one of the world leaders in kind of Lightning privacy and on-chain privacy. They just wrote a really good article, that was sponsored by, I think it was Wasabi. So there's a lot of little things you can do. I think being very selective with your service providers is one of them. The one of the easiest things is honestly using Lightning. There's a lot of FUD out there that Bitcoin isn't private, but who's Satoshi? So Bitcoin is private if you want it to be, but Lightning is great, especially if you're the sender. Lightning is really quite private. Receiving is a little bit trickier, but it's these little things. So try to use Lightning. That's a great way to improve your privacy, and then normalize privacy. So a lot of times people get a really bad rap, whether it's companies. I don't want other companies knowing how I'm spending my Bitcoin funds, or how how our users are withdrawing to address X, Y, or Z. No one should know that. However, politicians and fudsters and people who are trying to show you shitcoin X, Y, or Z, they're also telling you Bitcoin isn't private, or privacy is for bad people. What do you have to hide? No, we all need to focus on the fact that privacy is a right. We all deserve. Your government shouldn't know that you're spending your money on bugles or whatever. You should have a bearer instrument where you can privately pay for whatever you want. And Bitcoin has the ability to be that, as long as we fight this fight. But if we let it go too far in one direction, and every single service provider is caving to an imaginary financial action task force who doesn't really have any authority to tell you anything, if everyone starts doing that, and privacy becomes something that is a thing for terrorists or bad people, then we're gonna lose that battle. And so I think actually fighting for your privacy, not making people feel bad for wanting to hide everything they're doing with their money, which can tell you a lot about a person. I think these are all things in the right direction, but it's hard to even begin with all the things you could do. But I don't know. I said a lot there. Use Lightning. Maybe that's the first thing that's most approachable for most people. Use a VPN. Don't use Gmail. Some things like that.
These are all very helpful. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get to the work you're doing on OpenSats before we finish the conversation. Can you maybe start by just highlighting for people what OpenSats is and why you decided to start working on it?
Yeah. So thanks for asking. OpenSats is a nonprofit which supports free and open source software, specifically, Bitcoin contributors. So one thing that a lot of people don't know is Bitcoin is open source software. It is just code that is maintained by hundreds of people around the world who are actively contributing, and oftentimes they're not being paid. And so this creates kind of a free rider problem where you want the smartest people in the world working on Bitcoin because it really matters. But if they're not getting paid to do it, it's not really an economically rational thing. Theoretically, these people should go work for Facebook or the government, and someone that's going to pay them a bunch of money. And so in order to keep the Ben Carmans and the Tony Giorgios and all these core developers who are actually building Bitcoin, the tools that we need to maintain a free society where money is separate from the government. In order to do that, we need to have some sort of kind of funding mechanism for them. So we are a 501c3, so the IRS has approved us. You can donate to us. You can write off your taxes. Your corporation, if you're working for a big company, might actually match a donation. But you can come to us and you can donate to BTC Pay Server or Zeus Wallet or a privacy implementation of your choice. Anyone really. What we do is we list a bunch of projects on there. Again, BTC Pay Server's up there. Some wallets, some designers, some educators. But anyone can come and apply to be listed as long as their work is free and open source and it supports it's Bitcoin related. And then you can just come to OpenSats. You can donate Bitcoin. You can donate with a credit card or debit card, and it's tax deductible. You write it off, and you can support the project that you want. And so it's kind of a unique little situation where you can always, of course, go donate to a project of your choice directly, but we give you a tax-free avenue to do it. So if you're a big corporation and you want to simultaneously pay less tax and support the Bitcoin ecosystem, then you can do that. And same if you're just an individual pleb. And so, I think what we hope is that one day everyone is donating, $1 or $2 a month and is actually, maintaining this ecosystem where we keep the smartest people in the world working on Bitcoin. And we're just kind of a platform to match projects with donors and do it in a tax-free manner. And, yep.
Very cool. Yeah. This has been something that I think for for a lot of the history of open source software, there's been this this like elephant in the room has always been like, how do you fund it? How do you make sure it gets funded, especially if it's free? And so I guess my question to you is like, do you think that this donation approach is going to be the preferred funding mechanism for open source software within the Bitcoin ecosystem, but also outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem?
I think it kind of has to be. It's a yet to be solved problem. So like, here's the game theory in me. Like it's what you call the free rider problem. Because Bitcoin is a public good that everyone can use, everyone can benefit, and they don't have to pay for it, then like no one ends up paying for it. And so, luckily we have some amazingly, moral and good-willed people who just like love the challenge and probably love the vision, of Satoshi and, trying to separate money from state and create this like perfect money for the world. And to date, that has been enough. But like, if all these people were, being compensated fairly, we would have more and more contributors to Bitcoin. We would have, more security researchers. We would have more people working on Lightning and building out additional layers and protocols. So I think that it kind of has to be funded this way. Like, Bitcoin can't pay for itself. It incentivizes miners and it incentivizes, hash rate and the security of the system, but it doesn't really incentivize, developers and progress on top of the protocol. And unless you just want to like cross your fingers and hope that, people like Ben Carman and like all these like core main, there's probably, I think it's like 20 to 30 like really, influential core maintainers now. Unless you just want to hope that they contribute moving forward, and you think like, the world is this, happy place where everyone just gives for free, then I think you have to give back. And there are exchanges that have made millions and millions and billions of dollars, and some of them give back, some of them give to core maintainers. A lot of them are giving out grants. Some of them are starting kind of like micro bounties, so they pay for the things that they want to see. That's another good mechanism. But really, there's strength in numbers. There's millions of people using Bitcoin. There's not that many people maintaining it. So like, I think Matt Odell said this, if every pleb gave just like, $3 or $4 a month, like we could easily generate millions of dollars a month in revenue to incentivize designers, educators, protocol researchers, just software developers like that. A little bit from a lot of people will go a really long way. And I don't know, unless you've solved the free rider problem, I think this is the way it's going to have to happen. And luckily we get to build in, because we're 501c3 approved, you can pay less tax and give back to Bitcoin at the same time. So that's always nice.
Very cool. I like that initiative. I want to finish off with a segment I do at the end of every show. It's called the lightning round. And I have a few rapid fire questions for you.
All right, let's do it.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Stackwork. Stackwork is a lightning-powered platform for generating high-quality transcripts of all your audio or video content. They combine AI engines and hundreds of human workers all over the world who are paid over the Lightning Network to assemble these transcripts. And that's what lets Stackwork create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. To see the results for yourself, you can check out my personal website where I host transcripts for all my podcast episodes. If you want to learn more about Stackwork, visit stackwork.com. That is STAK work.com.
Okay, first one. Will gift cards play a bigger or smaller role in global commerce in the next 20 years versus the 20 years that has just passed?
By volume, probably more, just because inflation and numbers are going up with prices and stuff. But by like significance and actual like adoption, I would say less. Okay,
interesting. If you could only hold one asset and it could not be Bitcoin, one asset for the next 10 years, and it's not Bitcoin, which asset would you choose?
Killing me. It'd be gold, I guess. Yeah, gotta be gold.
Okay.
Maybe real estate, but I think real estate's a bit of a shit coin right now.
Has there been any book that has meaningfully changed your view of the world?
This is it's kind of a cop out answer, but the Bitcoin standard completely changed the way I like viewed the world, and not only viewed the world, but like lived my life. So shout out to Saifedean there. That's the easiest, kind of most straightforward answer. Everything Gigi writes is typically pretty influential as well for me.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Bitcoin Standard is one of the most highly recommended books. I do that question with most guests, and it's a great one.
One that might be good for your listeners, though, is one that really taught me a lot about economics, and in particular Austrian economics, and just like answered questions that we all kind of have and never maybe got a great answer to, was Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. That is a really good economics book for people who are just kind of dipping their feet into asking these these questions that we all want to know. And I would highly recommend that one as well. It's not related to Bitcoin. It's really just, a quick fire episode of maybe 50 questions that you ask about, how the world works. And it breaks it down really easy for you. So that's another one I always recommend beginners.
Very cool. If you had to guess, how many people have sent or received a Lightning Network payment in the last month?
In the last month?
Yeah. How many human beings?
So it's just individual human beings, not individual transactions? Oh, man.
Yeah, no, how many people have experienced the joy of either sending or receiving an instant money transfer on Lightning?
Oh, man. I saw you posted something about, I think Blue Wallet's doing 5 million transactions a month.
Oh, that was Wallet Satoshi. They broke 5 million. So they're doing about 10,000 a day for Wallet Satoshi alone.
But in the last month, I would say you got a lot of El Salvadorians, maybe 5 million people. I don't know. That could be order of magnitude off. I have no idea. This is hard.
That's fair. I mean, that's the whole point of this question. No one really knows the answer, but it's fun. Eventually, I'll converge on the correct answer when I get enough guesses from people. And then final question for you. You can give a shout out to one person who's doing great work in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Who's that person?
Oh, man, that's tough. Only one person?
You can give a shout out to multiple if you have to.
Well, I have to shout out my team. Ben Carman, Suhail, Atlas, Connor, Thomas. They're the ones, helping build TBC. We all have kind of a shared vision, and we're doing it for the right reasons. So love my team. I gotta shout out some of the Austin boys. Yeah, Tony Giorgio, Paul. The scene down here in Austin is great. Gigi is doing fantastic work overseas. This is an unfair question, Kevin. There's too many people. Some other people I love, Joe and Clancy, gotta give them a shout out. But if you're a Bitcoiner, if you are helping build on Bitcoin, you are loved, and you're loved by a lot of people, and the history books in the world will thank you one day. If you're working on fiat and the evil banking system, consider a switch, because you're not doing the right thing. So to all Bitcoiners, you're the most influential Bitcoiner.
Yeah, it's very inspiring to see how much activity and how much really focused building has been going on. I mean, every single day you see a new project or a new idea being presented on Stacker News. Someone's introducing new concepts, building a new company, and it's almost as if the price doesn't even exist. Yeah. People are just blind to that now. It's we don't care. We don't want to hear about FTX. We just we're just building. It's cool to see.
I know more people rooting for the price to keep going down. We're just trying to stack sats and stay humble. If I can buy a $10 Bitcoin a year from now, I'm all for it, man. Let's do it.
Right. Yeah. Low time preference. All right. This was an awesome conversation. Thank you for taking the time. Let's just finish it off with where listeners can go to learn more about you and the Bitcoin Company.
TheBitcoinCompany.com. In app stores, where the Bitcoin Co. That's the easiest way to get started. Download the app. It's super easy to use, super easy to start stacking sats, and you can actually save a lot, especially with price being quote unquote low right now, you can stack a ton of sats. You can go to the bitcoincompany.com/download to find that link. On Twitter, I'm a Bitcoin person, or the BTC Co. Check out OpenSats.org. Listen to Kevin Rook. He's a good Bitcoin only guy. Just stay humble, stack sats, stay away from leverage, stay away from crypto, read more, and just stay on the right path. We'll all be winners soon.
Awesome. Thanks again for the time. Hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah. Cheers, man. Thank you very much.
In the last 7 days, you guys sent in 5,894 sats, came in from 26 different supporters. Massive thank you to everyone who has been contributing. We got one extra comment from Jack_Mac, who says that he loves to learn about how tech companies are building and how they came up with their designs. He says, with how you explain things, it really gets my ideas in place. Thank you, Jack, for the sats and the comment. This was on episode 85, the last episode with Albert Boo. Check that one out if you have not already. And I can't wait to see what you guys send in this week.